Hello and welcome to my ball lightning / Arcmine guide, which will be my league starter of choice. I've played this build plenty of times, and with the changes it might be slightly buffed or pretty much remain exactly the same. So I'm gonna go over everything I do, and now before I hop over to the pad of building where I have everything written down, I first want to give a few tips, especially for leveling. So first of all, the most important tip for leveling, any spellcaster for that matter, not even just mines, the main reason why this recipe will give you 3 times your damage most likely in most cases with Orb of Storms and Stormblast Mine. It's a recipe that first of all you need a blue wand for it. Now ideally you have a wand that has your colors, so blue, blue, green in our case, so we'll use this. Also doesn't matter if it's a Driftwood wand or a Goat Horn. The lowest level of the recipe you can do is level 8, so you also need an alteration for this, and then you need a topaz ring. You can also use a sapphire ring, but that will give you cold damage, but in our case later on lightning damage does scale better, so I'd rather go for that. So then you just use topaz ring. Now a white topaz ring will give you the level 8 wand with 1 to 21 lightning damage to spells. So the damage you will get might look low, but don't underestimate this, especially early on when you have almost no flat damage, and this does go a long way. So when you're level 8 you ideally want to have at least one of these wands, and then later on what I like to do is do the rare one. So just to show you real quick, with a magic one it will require level 14 and give you a bit more flat spell damage, and then ideally with the rare ring you will get the level 20 wand with 1 to 48, it goes even to 49, 4 to 49 the highest roll. So now this wand is something you will use pretty much when you get it early Act 3 or late Act 2 until Blood Aqueduct, if not even longer, so definitely a good idea to pick up 2 of these wands. That damage will be insane early on, so make sure you do the recipe. Another quick tip I want to give is especially on bossing. Now first of all, if you fight a boss, there's an update that happened quite a few leagues back where the first few seconds when you fight a boss, when you just proc it, it will have increased defenses by a lot. This matters especially on lower acts. So when you pre-stack all your mines and you instantly pop the boss and you detonate all your mines, you might not deal that much damage. Now this doesn't mean that your damage is bad, it just means that the boss has really buff defenses. Another thing, on some bosses, especially like Brutus, it's still worth it to pre-stack mines. Now the way you do this is on your mine skill. You need to make sure that you have always attack without moving on. So then even if you put your mouse as far away as possible, it will still just throw the mines as far as they can reach pretty much from your standing point. So you just aim that where the boss is standing and then you just go and you start detonating them. Now if you don't have this on, what will happen is when you have your mouse too far away and you click, it will drag your character until you can place them on that exact spot. This is very bad on bosses because if you enter the room like on Brutus, it will drag you into his range and then you have no mines placed and he will instantly drag you in and you might die. Now also for this guide, please keep in mind I'm a softcore player, so I do intend to die quite a few times when leveling. This is not a big deal for me. It only starts becoming a big deal when on the later acts you just start dying every zone and you have to rerun the zone, so you waste a lot of times. At that point you might look into capping your resistances and getting some life maybe. So majority of my skill tree, I usually early on, especially Act 1, 2 and 3, I will skip life nodes, so it's up to you if you want to do that. And then lastly, level at your own pace. Of course we all see those messages of first person to reach this zone, first person to reach this zone, and quickly there will be an act or 2 ahead of you, if not more. Now just ignore that, go at your own pace. At the end of the day, it's a 3-month league, so saving that hour or a few hours even getting to maps is not that big of a deal, because the majority of players are nowhere near where those top races are at. So don't get discouraged, just play at your own pace, go slower if you like going slower. Don't feel like you just have to go at max efficiency for everything. After all, you need to have fun. So with that out of the way, I'm gonna bring up the pad of building. So this is my endgame tree. It's gonna be level 93 character. It's very generic. Just ignore the cluster for now. So the majority of it is pretty much very generic and straightforward. It's pretty much unchanged. I did decide to pick up acrobatics and phase acro this time around. I used to not take this and just work with a point somewhere else. Now I do want to take this because I think the dodge will be very helpful, especially now with the armor nerfs to Molten Shell. After that, I mean, it's pretty simple. I even have some leveling gear, so leveling part 1. You will pretty much just rush this node first, then you take this. You can take the life, it's selected here. For most people, personally I will not be taking this, but it's up to you. If you're dying, just take the life. And then leveling part 2, you just want to make your way. You just want to get this. Again, here's some life. You can skip this if you want, but if you're dying, just pick up the life. And then you just want to rush the mine cluster over here. This especially for the note that mines can only damage for 5 seconds after being thrown. This helps a lot on early bossing, because else they just kill your mines instantly when you throw them. And then of course leveling part 3. So you start picking up the crit nodes here. Might be a bit too early, but I just pick up the crit nodes because usually my damage isn't too bad. I just like to stay in the small cluster at the start. And then the next 3 will be early maps. So this 3 is level 66. So you could even still be at Blood Aqueduct at this point. I know some people like to farm there for quite a while. So pretty much you just make your way to Temple area, get these nodes, get some life on the way, some more crit, some more life. Now, very important, this cluster, you only take it if you're using Minefield, which I will be, since I will be leveling with Arc Mines with Minefield. So only take this if you're using Minefield. If not, then you can just drop all these points. And then obviously you can just take some damage anywhere else or some more life. So this is your 66 points, not too bad. You can also, if you want, just drop something else and go for Acro faster if you'd like. That's up to you. And then I have my level 83, so obviously we did pick up Acro here, and we just filled out some more life and some more crit, I think. So that's my level 83, which I think is very achievable pretty fast in the first few days, even if you're like a bit slower than everyone. Now I did name this Minefield since I'm planning to level with Arc Mines all the way to level 80, and around there is where I will look into swapping to Ball Lightning. And then I will talk about the gems later, but these are just the skill trees. So again, the only thing you need to change if you're not using Minefield is this cluster. You can even use Ball Lightning with Minefield and you keep exactly the same, so it's up to you which skill you prefer to level with. And this is my endgame tree. Pretty much you just end up picking the jewel sockets that you've skipped, because early on you will not have the gems for them. And then you start getting the area of effect. Now, especially if you play Ball Lightning, you do want to pick up these AoE nodes faster. What I also do, especially since before switching, I will still have these nodes. So these are 6 points here. So I will respec these 6, and then I will pretty much just pick up 1, 2, 3 here, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I will be 1 skill point short, but then I pretty much have all the AoE nodes I need to switch to Ball Lightning. Ideally, I want to use Arc Mines as long as possible, so even past level 80, if my damage is still good, I'm still clearing good, and the bosses are dying pretty fast, I will use Arc Mines for longer. The only reason I will switch to Ball Lightning is when I get to high tier content and the bosses are just unkillable or take a very long time. Now the last thing on my skill tree I want to talk about is my cluster jewel. Now, I don't know how available cluster jewels are. In my opinion, this will be very achievable. But again, this is just a flavor on top, so don't think you need to get this. This is something I will get pretty late, like level 85 plus is when I will look into it. So pretty much the ones I went with is just Arcane Pyrotechnics, which gives you Arcane Surge and a bit of Mind Damage. So it's pretty much just quality of life, because you can just link your Arcane Surge to Flame Dash and you will have it most of the times when you Flame Dash. And then Surprise Sabotage, which gives you 5% pen and a bit of crit multi. So nothing massive, but I do think it's some nice easy pickups for a few points. And then I'm using a small cluster with Faddle. And now the small nodes, you can get flat life on them. I think this will be pretty hard to get, or relatively hard to get for early on. You can also get stats on them, you can get resists on them, you can get increased effect, which just gives you more life. So I just want to go with Faddle to get a bit more life to work with early on, especially when my gear isn't up there. But it's up to you what you do here. So those are the skill trees, the leveling ones and everything. Now the Ascendancy I will quickly go over. These are the 4 nodes you want. Now early on you can choose. Most likely first normal lab you will go for Born in the Shadows to get the blind. Then second of all I go Bomb Specialist, and then third you can either choose for your Merc Lab. You can go Pyromaniac, which pretty much gives you more sustain and gives your mines less reservation. So if you're struggling on mana and you're struggling on sustaining your life, definitely go Pyromaniac, which is the majority of people to do. And the other option is to go Explosive Expert, especially if you're using Skither Balls linked to Infernal Legion. You will benefit from the crit multi as well, so this is a very good node. I usually go for Explosive Expert first, since I'm playing in softcore and I don't mind dying occasionally, but it's up to you which one you rush first. So now moving on, we're gonna go to the skills. Also the bandits, I suppose, when starting out you take a Lyra, and later on you can just respec it to get the 2 passive skill points. So it's up to you when you respec, just whenever you need it. Also the tree is something I didn't mention. When you're leveling, you're padding through here. but later on, I think after level your endgame 3, you will respec these points and go through here to save 2 points. But you can see the skill tree for yourself, so it's not too big of a deal if you change a few nodes around. So I did list my endgame setups here, so I will go ball lightning, slow approach, triple mind damage, ally focus. Now these top 4 gems are my 4 link gems, and then if I have a 5 link I'll go inspiration, and if I have a 6 link I'll go lightning penetration. Now this is just my setup. There's a lot of different gems you can use. If you want to use minefield you can do that. So that's why I left the last 2 gems here as optional, because this will be your 5th and your 6th link. You can choose this around as to whatever you want to use. You can use minefield, you can use charged mines, you can use swift assembly, you can use high impact mine. There's a lot of gems to choose from. This is just what I prefer. So feel free to change gems around. Like usually mines are very strong, so no matter what gems you take, you should be fine. For the auras now, it depends if you have an enlightened level 3, which is kind of hard to get day 1. So most likely you will not have this. Now with the changes, I also didn't forget to mention efficient explosive is my anoint that I will get. I always used to get this because it's a very cheap anoint, and it even got better this time around, so I will definitely use this. It's a very cheap anoint, and it also gives 15% reduced mana reservation of skills. So if with that, and you can also pick up, now they did change it, now you need to spend 2 points to get this reduced mana reserved over here. So if you want to pick that up as well, and maybe if you have the helm enchant, but I'll talk about that later, you might be able to fit in rat, precision, and summon skitterballs. Now if you can't fit in rat, don't worry, because early on you will not be using rat, you will just be using Herald Thunder. But this is the end game setup, of course, so once you can fit in all the auras and you can place down all your mines, having enough mana, that's when you switch to rat. And then utility endgame, just flame dash movement skill, you can use dash instead if you prefer that. Valorous Fire just gives us some burst damage on bosses. Arcane Surge linked to flame dash. Now I only need this if you don't have your jewel over here, then you can just drop it because you will always have this up. Then I have Enduring Cry, because Enduring Cry is getting buffed next league. It will heal you about 2k life with in 1 second, so it's very strong. It will be a quick panic button to heal up. So I will definitely. I was already using Enduring Crime beforehand for the frenzy, for the endurance charges, and now it got buffed a lot. So this is like better than a life flask. So definitely look into using this. But this is kind of optional. So if you don't like to press an extra button, feel free to drop this. Same with the Valorous Fire, unless you're doing some really endgame bossing, the burst damage will not really be needed. And then this is utility number 2. So this is another 4 link or 3 link. Pretty much cast on damage taken skill skin as my defensive choice. You can use Molten Shell as well, that's pretty great also. Then I have conductivity. I put it on cast on damage taken because I don't want to self-cast this, but you can just self-cast conductivity as well on bosses to get that extra minus lightning res. And then I have increased duration of all grace. Now the reason why I put 5 gems here when obviously you will only have 4 links, unless you're using this setup in your body armor, because a lot of these gems are up to you. You don't really need to use a cast on damage taken skill skin or molten shell for that matter. You will just die a bit more, but this might save you here and there. Connectivity again, if you don't want to use the extra button, you just lose a bit of damage. And then Val Grace, the reason why I want to use Val Grace, because I always used to use this already with increased duration, of course, so it lasts longer. But especially with Val Grace and then with Phase Acro, especially during mapping, you will not get hit that often, so it definitely helps a lot. So that's the endgame setup. Now, when I'm first mining, this will be my setup. So Arc, Elemental Focus, Trap and Mind Damage, Charge Mines. Again, this will most likely be my 4-link setup here. No, this will be my 3-link setup. So LE Focus, Trap and Mind Damage, Arc. Now, mind you, this is in a Tremor World. So if you don't have a Tremor World yet, then you definitely need to fit in Blast Chain Mine. So Blast Chain Mine will be your first link, and LE Focus, Trap and Mind Damage. So that's your 4-link. And after that, again, you can choose what you want. You can use Charged Mines, which is pretty nice for speed, which is most likely what I'll do, and Minefield, if you have a 6-link. Of course, if you don't, you need to drop one of them. Either one will work. You can also use Inspirations with Assembly. It's up to you what you use as gems. Just test them out, see what feels best for you, and just stick with that for a while. Next up, the auras on your mapping. So like I said, you're starting with Herald of Thunder and Summon Skitterbolts. You can, if you have the mana, you can link your Skitterbolts to Infernal Legion, which pretty much the burn will give you 30 crit multi once you have your Ascendancy. And then you can use a level 1 Precision or higher if you have the mana to spare to get a little bit more crit. So those are the gems. Now for the items, I didn't list all the items because Well, I talk about all the items. So first of all, Tremorhold, your weapon. This is your go-to item. Usually what I do is I'll farm a bit in Blood Aqueduct, and you can just sell the cards you get in there because you don't really need a tabula. And Tremorhold early on is usually around 10 to maybe even 15 chaos. So if you do a few chaos recipes and you get a few cards, you can get this pretty easily and pretty fast. But don't feel rushed. Even if you get to early maps and you still don't have one, you should be fine still. But this is something you want to work towards because it's pretty much your endgame weapon and it's very cheap, so it's easy to get. What I also like to do is after I get this, I'll either use it as a 4 link, because most likely I won't be able to afford a 5 link, but then I will just save up to get a prophecy that gives you a guaranteed 5 link, which usually goes for around 10 to 15 kills as well. So once you have that, you can just 5 link this and you're pretty much good to go to even red maps and beyond. Next up, your gear. Now, most gear, you're just gonna have rare items with life, resists, and that's pretty much it. Now, I did list a few gears because, first of all, the helmet. Now, you could get an enchant, especially early on, they're pretty cheap. Now, depending on what enchant you go for, of course, the ball lining enchants will be more expensive, but something like reduced mana resistance for rat is very undervalued. You could even get this for a chaos or something. So if you do manage to find that, that's great. You can use rat sooner, but again, it's a very minimal thing. The main thing you want to look for is just high life and resists, especially chaos swords if you can get it, but that's luxury. Again, the gloves, if you can find gloves with increased damage with the hits against chilled enemies, which is an incursion mod, usually it's pretty cheap as well, so if you can get that, nice. If not, just go for life and resist, of course. You also want to get a little bit of dex because you'll need some dex. So you can either get this on your gloves, your rings, your amulets. There's a lot of places to get dex. So just get a dex roll on one of your gear. Again, boots, you want to get movement speed, life, and resist. One nice thing about boots as well is you can get some nice enchants on them, especially crit chance if you haven't crit recently. Now, if your mine crits, that does not count as you critting, so pretty much you always have this up permanently, 120% increased crit chance. Now, this is the Overlab enchant, so it might be a bit harder to get early on, but even the Merklab enchants are pretty decent. You can also get pen or some more speed, so look for an enchant if you can afford it. Now, early on, I don't advise, other than your weapon, to spend more than a few chaos on each piece of gear. Maybe even 1 chaos for most pieces, since most of the gear you will replace pretty soon. So don't overpay for this. It's a nice buff, but it's not like your endgame pair of boots either way. Amulets, again, you can get dex on this pretty easily, especially on the implicit if you want to do that, if you need a dex. And then crit multi, first of all, life, of course. If you need a resist, you can get them on the amulet, but amulet is a nice base to get some crit multi and crit chance if you want that. So up to you. And again, your rings and belts, body, pretty much you just get life and resists on all the other pieces of gear. Now your flasks, the top 3 flasks are mandatory in my opinion, so if you want an enduring divine mana flask of well, either suffix works, of heat I like to use. You can also use of staunching for bleed or of warding for the curse removal, but you do need this divine mana flask, the enduring one. Next, diamond flask, because of course we're a crit build, so this pretty much doubles your crit. And then a quicksilver of adrenaline, because we like to move fast. And the last 2 flasks is up to you. You can use life flask, you can use an Azir's promise, you can use pretty much anything you want. I think a quartz flask is something I will probably use, because it gives you that 10% dodge and spell dodge, so that just helps our phase aggro even more. So it's up to you. Also boots, something I want to mention, that might be a nice pair of boots to look at. Ziri Step, so you can use these boots. They give you, I think it goes up to 16% spell dodge, which is very nice. They also give 30% move speed and life, and they're from normal Aziri, so they should be pretty available on day 1. So those are a nice pair of boots to use. Now of course you do not get the res on them, but they're definitely a nice pair of boots to pick up. And then of course jewels, later on you just want to get life, crit on them, crit multi, mind damage, pretty much any damage you can get on life. Or if you need resists, or well, you should not need resists, but if you need some stats or something, you can get it on jewels as well. So that's pretty much the build. Now I do have a note section here prepared to help you level. So it's pretty much straightforward. I obviously didn't put everything in here, but this is pretty much all you need to know. So you start with Freezing Pulse and Stormblast Mine. You can even drop the Freezing Pulse, honestly, because you're only going to get to level 4, so it's not that big of a deal. Stormblast Mine linked with Leather Poison, which you get as a shadow. After Hail Rake, you get to level 4. Then you want to use Orb of Storms linked with, well, you want to use Frostbomb linked with Onslaught, but if you have the colors, you can also fit Orb of Storms in there. If not, you just use Orb of Storms separate in another socket. You also want to use Frostblink, and I'm going to actually add it here, link to Arcane Surge. Very important, you want to keep your Arcane Surge to level 1. Now, if you don't have a blue, then just use Frostblink by itself, of course. And then, of course, you keep Stormblast Mine with Leather Poison linked, and you use this for single target mainly, or big blue packs. You get to Prison, level 8. You want to switch Leather Poison for added lightning damage. And if you do have a 3-link blue-green, you also want to add Swift Assembly to your Stormblast Mine. You can also just use Leather Poison instead of the Swift Assembly, excuse me. So it's up to you what you do. Level 10, you get an upgraded movement skill. Now, you can either use Smoke Mine or Flame Dash, or if you're one of the racers, you want to use both, but don't feel obligated to do this. It does save a bit of time, but unless you know what you're doing, this might even end up losing you time. So just use one if you're not used to it, and if you are, just use both. I would advise Smoke Mine over Flame Dash, since after Smoke Mine, you have a few seconds of 20% increased movement speed. But of course, if you don't want to press 2 buttons, you can just use the Flame Dash instead. This will work just fine. And then optional at level 12, you can pick up an Arc Gem if you go back to town. And you can just start leveling in an offhand. Now, this isn't mandatory. You can also just start using Arc at this point already if you want, but I generally wait till I have the 4-link. So it's up to you, don't feel obligated to do this again. At level 16, you get big power spikes because you get Skitterbolts. You can link this to Infernal Legion. Now, early on, Infernal Legion won't do much on it since you don't have your Ascendancy yet for the crit. But I mean, if you have the mana, you may as well, does a bit extra damage. And Herald of Thunder, which is your second aura. You can drop Infernal Legion if you have mana issues. Now, at this point, you can either still use Frostbomb, or you can drop it if you're starting to have too many buttons to press, and I know that most people don't like pressing too many buttons, so you can drop your Frostbomb and just link your Orb of Stone to Onslaught and add lightning damage. With the Herald of Thunder, and if you did the Wand Craft, might be enough to kill packs, and then just use a mine here and there. And your single targets, you will still use Stormblast Mine, Swift Assembly, and then you can either use Trap and Mine Damage or Elemental Focus. I'd actually prioritize Elemental Focus over Trap and Mine Damage, because this does reduce your mine throwing speed. But of course, once you get the 4-link, then if you get lucky and get an early 4-link, you can use both. And then movement skill with Flame Dash or Smoke Mine or both, linked to Arcane Surge level 1. And then skipping to level 24, which is Act 3. You get Conductivity as your curse, and you can just self-cast it on bosses to get that extra damage. And then level 28 is usually when I switch to Arc Mines, especially if I have a 4-link, I will definitely look into it. And your setup will be Arc, Blast Chain Mine, Trap and Mine Damage, and Elemental Focus as a 4-link. Now if you only have a 3-link, you can either drop Trap and Mine Damage or Elemental Focus depending on the links you got. Then this will be blue, and then either green or blue. So it's up to you what links you got, you can drop either. Ideally, of course, Elemental Focus will be the priority to keep. And then this is an optional one. You can still be using Orb of Storms, Onslaught, added Lightning Alley Focus. This is mainly just to get that extra movement speed from Onslaught early on, which does help you get through decks a bit faster, but of course it's an optional step if you don't mind going a tiny bit slower. And then pretty much at this point you're using Arc Mines for both bossing and mobs, and the Orb of Storm is just for the Onslaught. But in Act 5 you do get the Silver Flask. So this is where the leveling section ends, and that's because you pretty much don't really switch anything after this point anyway. At level 6 you can get a few extra utility gems if you like, you don't have to. And then you just go to Blood Aqueduct, and then you start farming, and then you look into what your league strategy will be. Some people like to stay in Blood Aqueduct, some people just like to rush maps faster. Some people like to do a lot of early maps and just make a lot of money. Some people want to do lab. Now that's up to you what you do at this point, but this is generally how you level. And if you want to do any practice runs, you only really need to practice the early 4 acts, because that's where you will be switching out gems a lot and switching out gear. But generally after this point, the only things you will be looking for is just gear with life and resist on them to die less. And that's pretty much it. So that will be it for the guide. If I did miss anything or forgot something or something isn't clear to you, make sure you leave it in the comment section. I will definitely try to read all of them, especially before league start, so you're not stuck. So also a thing, I will link my profile in the description. This will be an easier way to keep up to date with my character, which of course will be public, so you can see what gems I'm currently using and what my gear looks like. So in case I make any changes, you can quickly see it on my profile. And of course, next video will probably be a league update to see how the build is doing and how far I've gotten. Might be a day into the league or 2 days even, so I'll keep you up to date. I hope you enjoyed the guide, hope this helps you, and hopefully you do have a great league start, and see you in the next video.